Hey guys, we're going to be doing a segment on a book for once, as opposed to talking about a feature film. We are talking about a graphic novel, so it's not high art, it's not literature that we're talking about, but we are talking about Batman 89. Let's see if we can get that in focus. Good enough. Batman 89 is a graphic novel. It's actually a compendium of about, I think it's 6 issues in here, of the 89 series that was written by Sam Hamm and illustrated by Joe Knows. I don't know. I'm probably fucking up that last name. And we also have Leonardo Ito, I believe, as the colorist. I might have that wrong as well. Don't hold me as the authority on facts with this video here. It wasn't really on my radar because I was aware of the fact that they had done a pitch to do a Batman 89 comic book series a while back when the Batman 66 series returned to Warner Brothers and they opted to franchise it as opposed to putting out a VHS tape of the movie every 6 years, which is what Fox was doing with that property. And I was looking forward to it, but I haven't really been much of a comic book reader as of late. I think the last recent comic book that I may have picked up was something that Frank Miller published. I believe it was one of his spin-offs to The Dark Knight Returns 3. Because Dark Knight Returns 3 was kind of a piece of shit. It wasn't really that. It started interesting. It could have went to some interesting places, some 2001 Frank Miller places, and opted to go somewhere else with it. And I just kind of felt let down in that regard. It wasn't what would have satiated my palate. He did The Last Crusade shortly thereafter, which felt like the swan song to his comic book writing career, even though I think he has Ronin 2 coming out. So we have this book, 1989 Batman, and it is a continuation of the Burton films. It ignores Batman Forever and Batman and Robin as part of that lore, naturally, which is kind of a recent phenomenon, right? It wasn't always that, the beginning director being dispatched would suddenly render everything that comes after that person non-canonical, right? This is a new trend, a new idea that has been inserted in people's heads. And I don't know if I necessarily follow that, especially since Batman wasn't his to begin with. But his Batman, his version of Batman is so distinct. What his Gotham City was, what his characters were, I think you just mention his name and you can perfectly envision that without fail. And so this comic book, Batman 89, had a lot to live up to. And yet, I think it could have been an easier task than what they ultimately put upon themselves, in that all you really have to do is, first of all, your best, and your best at trying to envision what Tim Burton's idea of this particular character might have been. And if you do that and you nail it just close enough, then it's going to feel legitimate. It's going to feel like an authentic continuation because we have no idea what that would have looked like, unfortunately. And what they opted to do instead, and this was the first red flag for me with this book, is they wanted to incorporate different pre-existing elements of the Batman lore and Batman mythos into this Burton universe, which I'm not necessarily against in theory, but it just comes across as very cheap fan service. It comes across as lazy thinking. And the first element of that is the Harvey Dent character. When half of his face becomes damaged, the damage is blue. And it was blue in the animated series because you couldn't show a gory, bloody, disgusting, raw nerve face to children. And they opted to go with that for this book. And the suit is almost verbatim what it was in the animated series. And this is another problem of mine as well. Is Batman fans currently look at Batman the Animated Series as the ultimate Batman, the definitive version of Batman. And it's not. It's a children's show. You're gassing yourself up about a kid's show. And just because it's normalized in 2022 for adults to be watching cartoons and cartoon movies, it's not the same thing as a live action rendition. And you can't hold it to the same measure right? So, you would see online back in 2008, 2009, you go on message boards, people would be like, who's your favorite Batman? Is it Michael Keaton? Is it Val Kilmer, George Clooney, Christian Bale, or Kevin Conroy? Kevin Conroy didn't play Batman. Kevin Conroy gave his voice. It's not the same thing. And that isn't the definitive Batman. I think it's a great animated series. I think it's a great version of the character, but it's a kid's show. Okay? And it's time to let it go. It's time to, if you're gonna honor a part of the Batman history, look beyond that. There's 100 episodes, 120 episodes of that series. This is not really related to Batman 89, but I guess it kind of is, because there's a line in this book where he's criticizing Catwoman, and he says, we're different, you and I. You kill, I don't. Burton's Batman killed a fuck ton of people. Burton's Batman blew a guy up. Burton's Batman, I think he gunned down a bunch of people with his Batmobile in 89. Okay? He killed the Joker. He killed the Penguin. This isn't, and let me just get to the book itself. My biggest problem with this book is not necessarily the callbacks and the fan service and, doing a Joker's gang and doing the Sons of Batman from the Frank Miller books. I don't like any of that. My biggest problem with this series is that Sam Hamm, who this should have been a slam dunk, you haven't like a legitimate screenwriter, the guy who wrote Batman 1989, the screenplay, comes back and does this series. It should have been a slam dunk. Sam Hamm does seem disenchanted with the Batman character and the Batman character's purpose. It shouldn't have been called Batman 89. It should have been called Batman 2020, because this feels very 2020. This feels middle of riots, middle of protests. We're demonizing cops. We're demonizing vigilantes. There's all these elements that are baked into it that feel like Sam Hamm was scrolling Twitter in the midst of writing pages of the script to this. And it doesn't read like 1989. Like, you have terms like code switching that are included in this book that nobody, like, that wasn't part of the global vocabulary during that period of time. It was probably a thing in academic circles. I can't imagine it being tossed around between, like, terms that just came into fruition in the past 5 years. Like, remember how everybody started using the word demagogue in 2017? The word demagogue was just suddenly part of everyone's vocabulary, and they were espousing it here and there, and then it disappears, right? By 2018, 2019, no one's using the word demagogue anymore. It's just something that was planted into people's heads for a year, and they went with it, and they used it, and it sounded good, and it felt good on their tongue. You have a lot of those modern terms like that littered throughout this book. And the Batman in this is kind of similar to the Robert Pattinson Batman in that he's just mopey and people are insulting him all the time. They don't like that Bruce Wayne's wealthy, and they're kind of taking jabs at him. He's just like, well, I guess that's my job, is to take people's jabs at me. But that was never Michael Keaton's Bruce Wayne or Batman. He had a sort of quiet sharpness to him in those films, and it's not present in the book. It feels like someone who doesn't understand the character. It feels like someone who doesn't like what the character is about, And I thought everything, because I'm not wholly negative on it. I'm only about 70% negative on this book. I thought one of the biggest highlights of it was the unfolding of that Harvey Dent character. The Harvey Dent character is handled very well, and it's essentially his book. Bruce Wayne, and in this way, maybe it's fitting within that line of films, those 4 films, right? Because typically when it was with the Burton and Schumacher films, Batman was almost a secondary character. It would be the special guest star of the week villain who would take, the limelight there. And that's certainly the case with this book. You also have a version of Robin, which I believe was supposed to be Dick Grayson in Batman Returns. In this book, his name is Drake. Oh, fuck. The last name isn't coming to mind off the top of my head. But it echoes Tim Drake. His character is just kind of obnoxious and one-dimensional. there's really nothing that ultimately shines through as something that is worth picking up this book over. What drew me in, aside from Sam Hamm being the scribe of it, was that all of the covers looked fairly impressive to me. There's some beautiful artwork that was done for this book, and the art that is present from Old Joe, as I like to call him, isn't half bad, but there's too many problems with this. I think I might be out on DC Comics for a little bit. Anyway, I do have this other book here. If I can just pick it up in time. I mistakenly put a bunch of junk on top of it before hitting record. I was curious to check this out because it reminded me of EC Comics. We have Soul Plumber from the last podcast on the left, boys. And I read the first issue of this and I really enjoyed it. And I will be going through this entire book very soon. Maybe I'll do a review on that at some point. So, Batman 89, it's not worth the trouble. And if they do a sequel to this, I think I'm going to have to skip it. Anyway, thank you guys for joining me for this book review. It was probably a little bit rustier than my usual videos doing podcasts and whatnot. You know, it takes a second to get used to talking to yourself again, as opposed to a 40-year-old Costa Rican man. But thank you for watching this video. And if you enjoyed it, please remember to hit like, subscribe, and leave a comment in the comment section, because I love reading those and I'll probably write back to you. I'll probably enjoy reading what you have to say. All right. Thank you again. And I'll see you for the next one.